everybody, welcome back to Biblical Greek Made Easy. This is class 2 of module 2, and today we're going to go a little bit deeper into Greek verbs. We're going to learn a wrinkle that can show up with some verbs, changing the vowels, and it's pretty simple, not too deep, not too difficult, but it is going to introduce us to some of the weirdness, particularly with vowels and vowel changes that can show up with Greek words. But don't worry about it, we're going to make sure we break it down for you. This is Biblical Greek Made Easy. We're going to make it as easy as possible for you, but also get you what you need to know. So as we get started today, let me share a scripture verse with you. 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, "So, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God." And guys, that's what we're trying to do here, right? This process of learning Greek, studying our Greek, studying our vocabulary, we're learning how to engage with Scripture better, and this is all an outflow of our spiritual life. We are trying to engage with God's Word more, and we're doing this all for the glory of God. So learning present active indicative verbs is part of what we do for the glory of God. Learning contract verbs is part of what we do for the glory of God. So let me encourage you with that. Let this be an outflow of your spiritual life. See this as connected to that discipline that you do to honor God, to engage with the divine. That's what we want to do today, okay? And I also say parenthetically, this verse, 1 Corinthians 10:31, is one of the most beautiful verses in Greek, okay? And so you don't know enough, you don't know the tense, actually the mood that this is in, you don't know yet, but you will know it soon enough. In a few class periods, when we get to the subjunctive, I'm going to make sure that I show you this verse and we read it together because it's beautiful in Greek. It's one of the most poetically wonderful, pleasing verses in the Greek. So I want to make sure I show that to you. Put a pin in that for now. We'll come back to that in a few class periods. But here's the tip of the day, okay? Don't make things harder than they need to be. Okay? That's a good lesson for life. The old saying goes, I think it was Mark Twain who said, make things as simple as possible, but no simpler, right? Don't make them too simple to where you're leaving out key information, but make them as simple as they can be, right? So don't make things harder than they need to be. And that's what we're going to try to do in this class period today. And in Greek in general, in life in general, we're going to try to make things simple, but not too simple. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. Why does this matter today? So we're going to talk about contract verbs, which is the next step in learning the verbal system. There's a certain group of verbs that are called contract verbs that behave in a certain way, and we need to learn those in order to keep going with Greek. But also, this is going to introduce us to some of the trickiness that Greek verbs can bring us, okay? We know that sometimes vowels change in Greek words. Sometimes vowels lengthen. Sometimes they combine weirdly with other letters that are around them. Sometimes letters drop out altogether. And we don't need to memorize exactly every single instance that happens. There's too many of those. But we just need to be aware of that sort of thing that happens. And so we're going to see that. We're going to get introduced to some of the trickiness of verbs today, which is going to continue to build. I'll tell you that up front, okay? It's the regular verbs are not going to be the ones that are going to give us trouble. It's going to be the weird verbs, okay? And we've got ways that we'll deal with those, and I'll give you some strategies and some tips as we move forward. But that's what we're doing today. So let's go ahead and talk about this. So contract verbs are those verbs with stems ending in an alpha, epsilon, or omicron. The final vowel is called a contract vowel, okay? So basically what's going to happen is you're going to have the stem of the word. Remember we said the stem is that beginning part of the word with no ending and no connecting vowel on it, okay? And then we're going to add the connecting vowel and the ending, and the way that all is going to fit together, if you think of those like puzzle pieces or like, you know, parts of a train, different cars on a train kind of all clicking together, that sort of thing. The way those are going to fit together, there's going to be a change that happens. One of those vowels is going to get lost, and that's what we call the contraction, right? Is that these vowels are going to combine and simplify, and for that reason, they're called contract verbs. So the example you see there, poiete, you see we've got poie there as the stem, and then we're going to add epsilon as the connecting vowel, and then we're going to add our ending, which is te, okay? So are we going to have poiete? No, that's not going to make sense. And so that epsilon is going to change to an epsilon iota, or that long A sound diphthong, right? So instead we get poiete, poiete, okay? Now, is that a problem? No, not really, unless you are really, really particular on every single letter that shows up in the word has to be accounted for, right? That's really the problem, is that there's a change in the middle, okay? But as far as I'm concerned, can you recognize that poiete comes from poieo? You don't know that verb yet. That's a new verb for you this week. Yeah, it's pretty recognizable as the original verb. Can you recognize the ending? Yeah, it's te. It's real simple, right? Second person plural. That's basically it, okay? And so you see here, when the final stem vowel comes in contact with a connecting vowel, the two vowels contract. The two will form a new vowel or a diphthong, okay? So we'll just notice that that change is going to happen. Okay, so Mounce categorizes contract verbs based on their stem vowel because they behave in the same way. So you have alpha contracts, for example, that behave in a certain way, or epsilon contracts that behave in a certain way, okay? So just know that there's these different categories. Mounce is also going to have these rules of contraction. You know, Mounce loves to have these rules. And actually, he's very systematic in the way he goes about these things, and he brings together these rules and the way things behave. I'm going to let you know about these, and that's about it. Okay, so Mounce has 8 rules of contraction. They show up on pages 173 to 175. And note that is the 4th edition text. So if you're using a different text, it's likely the same chapter, but the page numbers are going to be a little bit different, so be aware of that. And notice what Mounce says on page 175. He says, be sure to learn these rules exactly. You will be meeting other contracted forms, and if you know the rules, you will be able to figure them out. Guys, can I tell you, going back to the tip of the day, don't make things harder than they need to be. Make things as simple as possible, but no simpler. Guys, you're free to learn these 8 rules if you want to. I have not found them to be helpful, okay? I would say save brain space for other places, and don't worry about these 8 contracted rules. Because let me show you the paradigm right here. You see luo there on the left, luo, lues, lue, luam, and luete, luusi. That's the present active indicative that we saw last time for luo, which is not a contract verb, it's just a regular verb. And then next to it, you see agapao, and you see the endings there. Now, it is a little bit different. We see some contraction going on. And actually, agapao is one of the weirder ones, okay? But if you saw this, could you figure out the person and number? Agapo, agapas, agapa. Now, notice second person singular, agapas. It's not agapes, so the vowels are a little bit different. But you see the iota subscript there. You see the sigma. That's the ending we're kind of looking for there, right? So could you recognize that as second person singular? Okay. Third person singular, agapa. Notice rather than lu a, we get agapa. Once again, we have the iota subscript. They're not all going to have those subscripts, by the way. Okay. If this was poieo, it would be poies and then poie. So it would look much similar to the luo on the left there. And then agapomen, notice we've got the lengthening of the vowel in the middle to the omega. But again, that's still really recognizable as first person plural, right? And then agapate and then agaposen, okay? So that's what the paradigm looks like. A word or two about this. Notice the lexical form at the top. Notice how in the gray bar there we've got the lexical form. For luo, it's luo. And then we've got agapao listed, okay? And we told you that the lexical form is the first person singular present active indicative. But when you look down right below it, you see that the first person singular there is listed agapo. Now this is something that Greek grammars do to let you know about contract verbs, okay? So agapao is technically the lexical form, and they're putting that alpha before the omega at the ending so that you know it's an alpha contract, okay? That's kind of the sign to you that this is behaving like an alpha contract. Again, there's these categories that you can follow if you want to, okay? But when it shows up in context, it looks like the one below. So, for example, if agapao shows up in the New Testament, first person singular, present active indicative, it's not going to say agapao, it's going to say agapo, because that alpha isn't actually part of the word. It's just there in the lexical form to tip you off that this is an alpha contract. Okay? So be aware of that little wrinkle that grammars do. And then, what you're really going to want to pay attention to is how it actually shows up in the New Testament. So agapo, if you saw that, could you realize that is the verb that it is, agapao, which means I love, that it is first person singular, present active indicative. That's what you need to know. Okay. Now you have some options here, okay? If you want to be really exact and particular on things, you're free to memorize those 8 rules that Mounce gives you. You're free to pay attention to the different categories of alpha contracts, epsilon contracts, omicron contracts, etc. Figure out how all those behave, memorize the patterns, and go from there. That's fine. Or you can just know that certain verbs, which you can kind of note that when you come across, that they change their vowels in the middle, and sometimes the endings, the last vowel might look a little bit weird, but the endings are still pretty much the same, okay? I think that second pattern is a lot better because you just save so much brain space. You go over them a few times, you get comfortable with the way those words flow and work, and it works out fine, okay? But again, I want to give you freedom there to do that. Let me show you. A lot of Greek teachers will hand out charts like this. This is a contraction chart, okay? So you see there's vowels on the left, vowels on the top, vowels and diphthongs on the top, and when those come together, it's going to show you what they contract to. Okay, so hypothetically, as a Greek student, you could memorize every combination of different vowels and diphthongs combining with something else and know what it's going to look like. Guys, again, I just don't think that's necessary. Okay, I don't think you need to know exactly what every single one looks like. All you need to be able to do is recognize the lexical form of the verb and know the person and number. And if you can do that, you're good. If you can translate, you're good. That's the most important thing. Okay? I will give you one big hint here, though. One of the things you're going to notice is that the circumflex is the sign that contraction has occurred, okay? The circumflex here, remember, it looks like that little upside down smiley face or a frowny face or whatever over the vowel, okay? In this case, it's the upsilon, but that circumflex up above, that's a sign that contraction has occurred. That means something above has changed, okay? So use that as a hint to know that contraction has occurred. And if we go back and look at that paradigm again of agapao, notice how a circumflex is over that vowel that's changed every single time. Okay, so use that as a tool to know that contraction has occurred. Why do we need to know contraction has occurred? Again, you don't necessarily need to know that, other than just to know that sometimes those vowels change. If there's a letter in the middle that seems to have disappeared, it probably did, especially if there's a circumflex that shows up over the vowel. We just want to be aware of that sometimes vowels change. Okay? Again, don't make things harder than they need to be. Practice your vocabulary. Become familiar with what the words are. Be able to recognize them in context. Be able to parse them. If you can do that, you don't need to know the 3 different patterns of contraction. You don't need to know the dozen different ways that vowels can contract with each other. All that's wasted brain space. Okay? So let's talk about the new verbs this chapter, okay? Most of these are contract verbs, okay? Agapao, we saw before, and that's probably the weirdest of the group because it gets those iota subscripts going on. It's a little bit shorter. That's why I showed you that one, because that's about as weird as it's going to get, okay? And then we've got, by the way, agapao means I love. Zeteo means I seek, and that's also a contract word. That's an epsilon contract. It's going to be zeto in context, but that epsilon's there to show you that it's an epsilon contract. Kaleo is I call, also an epsilon contract. Laleo is I speak, also an epsilon contract. Oida is weird. Oida means I know, like K-N-O-W, I know. And notice that it's the first one we've seen that doesn't end in an omega, right? And this is because it's actually a perfect verb, something later that is treated like a present by the time of the 1st century Koine Greek. And so oida is a little bit different, and look up the paradigm for that. You're going to want to see it. It's weird. It behaves differently, especially in that first person singular. That's going to be one of the weird verbs that if you have a page in your notebook, sometimes I recommend that students flip all the way to the back, like the very back page of their notebook, have a page there for weird verbs. Oida could be one of those that you just put in there to just kind of flag and mark and go over on a regular basis, to know that some verbs are just kind of, extra grace required kind of verbs. They're just a little bit more difficult, and you need to review them more. And then we got plerao, which again would be, it's an omicron contract. It would be plero. In context, it means I fill or I fulfill. So it can be like I fill a jar, or it could be I fulfill a commandment, either one of those. And then poieo, an epsilon contract, means I do or I make. Can be either one of those, okay? I do or I make. And then tereo, an epsilon contract, would be tero. In context, means I keep or I guard. I keep or I guard. The Hebrew word shamar means those same things, okay? So keep or guard. So tereo is I keep or I guard. So those are our new verbs. And again, all of those except oida are contract verbs. And actually, oida might be, it's just weird kind of in its own right. It may technically be considered a contract as well, but it's kind of not in the same pattern as those others. Now again, there's several different patterns there. Do you need to remember the patterns? I just don't think that you do, okay? Spend some time with it. See how your comfort level goes. You can always go back and learn those 8 rules if you need to, but again, I just don't think it's necessary. Instead, learn your vocabulary, practice translating, get good at parsing those. If you can do that, I think you're going to find that it goes pretty well for you. All right, so let's go ahead and review. So we learned contract verbs today, okay? We learned that some verbs change their vowels in the middle of the word. And that's not going to get us down. That's okay. We're going to be really dedicated to the fundamentals of the Greek language and what we need to know. We're going to try to recognize the lexical form. We're going to deal with our endings as they come up. If some weird stuff happens in the middle, that kind of doesn't concern us. We're just going to deal with it. We're going to be good at identifying words. We're going to be good at vocabulary, and that's going to get us through. And we also learned this new slate of vocabulary words, some of which were contract verbs. And our vocabulary is growing. We're getting more and more aware of verbs that show up in the New Testament, and it's really increasing our translating capacity, which is exciting, isn't it? Okay, so guys, that's the chapter, that's the class for today. Keep studying, keep practicing, and we'll see you next time.